started. So we're gonna start with a little standing warm up. Prop today, if you have a ball or a block or something that will substitute, you can use that, but no worries if not, all the exercises should be fine without. Let's just start with a little mobilization since it's nice and chilly here. So easy twisting from side to side. Let all your joints move. So ankles, knees, hips, kind of playing with, does my neck move? Do I get a little bit more rotation when I use my eyes to look behind me? Do one more each way. And then let's do some shoulder rolls. Let's go opposite. So we'll do one at a time, just rolling back here. And let the rib cage move a little bit, just starting to come into the back body, bring some awareness to those blades. And then let's reverse it. How's the breath? Kind of checking in where the breath is. If it's been more belly breath or kind of breath into the upper chest and shoulders, can you bring it into the ribs, the back and the side of the body? Let's do some arm circles. So we'll do just one arm. You can find kind of a nice, easy asymmetrical stance and just sweep that arm up and back. You can add a little twist here to get a little rotation through the thoracic spine. And then let's reverse it. Nice big sweeps. Just kind of checking in. This does not have to have any particular strict form just yet. And then let's switch to the other side here. We'll go 3, one direction. Just kind of noticing, all right, how is everything moving? Where's the tightness? Where's the mobility? And then we'll release and reverse. Last circle here. Nice. And then let's bring the feet a little bit closer. So just underneath the sit bones here, we'll take a couple roll down. So nodding the chin, letting the crown of the head point towards the ground. Arms can drape, or if you need a little more support, you can definitely use them on the body. And we'll roll it up. And let's do a nice big reach of the arms to the ceiling in between, maybe looking up. And then rolling forward again. By all means, if the knees need to bend, especially if the hammies are a little bit tight first thing in the morning, you can keep those legs bent, maybe nodding the chin or shaking the head, rolling it up, pushing through the feet, starting to find a little bit of core contraction here. They've got a little bit of support through the abdominals. One more just like this. Rolling it all the way down. We're going to come onto our hands and knees. So if you need a kneeling pad or you want to fold your mat, you're more than welcome to here. So with your wrists underneath your shoulders and knees under your hips, try just a couple shoulder isolations. I'm going to let my chest fall through my arms, shoulder blades kind of drop together, and then I'm going to push away and then drop and then push. So we just want to notice the difference between here's kind of my unsupported position versus my super supported position, pushing out of the ground. One more just like that. And then relax your stomach. So kind of letting the core just completely release, keeping that strong push out of the ground. See if without changing your bones, you can just engage your abs. So I'm kind of pulling my organs in, releasing, pulling my organs in and releasing. Let's do one more like that, pulling those organs in. Okay, so I've got my core on and pushing out of my arms. We're going to take this into a bird dog. So I can either keep my fingers and toes in the ground, or maybe I float up, right? And I can kind of pick and choose here. Nice and easy, smooth breath. We'll just go for an inhale and an exhale as we either tap or float. You can pick and choose. So maybe feeling a little unstable, maybe I'm going to keep my fingers down and lift my leg up. That gives my nervous system just a little extra feedback. Can you keep that same stability through the shoulders and through the abs? So I'm just going to watch for maybe sinking in the shoulder as I reach up, or maybe losing my core a little bit. So think of reaching the front of your mat and the back of your mat in opposite directions. Kind of building up the heat here. Let's try one more each way. We're looking for supporting system, nice and strong. And then when you come back into this last one, let's take just a couple cat cows. So pressing away, getting a nice stretch through the shoulder blades here, looking towards your inner thighs. And then opening the chest and sits bones. We'll do that 2 more times. Nice big stretch. So using my core and my shoulders for sure. They're not getting a break yet. But it's a nice little stretch if you want to take some wiggles in the hips. Just find like a little bit of movement. If that feels good, let's do one more round here. And extending into your extension. Okay, we're gonna come onto our bum here so you can cross your ankles, roll back, walk your feet out a little bit wider than your hips, either with hands behind you or hands floating. We're gonna take a little windshield wiper. And so we're just looking for, okay, how are the hips moving today for kind of optimal hip movement? We want both internal and external rotation in our thighs. We know everything can kind of work the way it was intended to work when we've got that full range. You might crawl forward a little bit on your mat. Let's try one more each way. If you've got any pain in the knee, we're gonna think about moving from the hip joint and widening the legs, maybe bringing the hands back down. And then we'll bring our feet on the ground here. Now, if you have your ball or your block, you can use it here. If you don't, no worries. I'm gonna squeeze that block or ball. Hands can either be under the thighs or on top of the knees, and we're just gonna roll back to our arms straighten. So I'm exhaling to roll back. Take a breath in to challenge the abs. Squeeze that ball or block. Exhale to flex forward. So we're always gonna exhale kind of on the work for this one. So we'll exhale to reach back. Take a breath in to challenge. We're holding this curl here, and then exhale, crunching to come back up. So it's my pelvis that rolls back, right? I'm seated upright, my pelvis flips. And then I'm gonna roll my ribs forward first, and then keep that C curve through my spine. This is feeling groovy. You can ditch the touching and add a little extra load. So when my arms are floating, right, I've got a little more load, a little more challenge, a little harder in the nervous system too. So we've got 2 more here. Utilize that exhale like you're blowing out a candle as you squeeze that ball. And then just noticing if shoulders get a little chatty. Take your arms with you as you roll back. Nice, you guys. And then exhale to come forward. You're gonna roll all the way down. If you need more support, you can bring your hands to the back of your thighs here. We're gonna pull the feet in. You're gonna take that ball out. Toe heel your feet to the edges of your mat. So I'm kind of wide here. I'm in a little external rotation. I'm gonna lift my toes. So my feet are flexed, I'm on my heels. I'm just gonna press my hips up. So nice shoulder bridge here. Now, if I'm arched in my back, I might feel a little bit of strain. So see if you can tip your pubic bone towards your chest and find your core engaging. So I've got length through my low back because my abs are on. And we're just gonna hold this for a couple of breaths, arms up if you want a little bit more of a challenge. So we're immediately just going into an isometric glute bridge. Really good for anti kind of sitting activation. Yep, nice. And then just rest your bum back down. We're gonna do one more like that. So exhaling to press up. Kind of do a little check here. If I'm a little arched, I might feel it in my back. Think of engaging your abs, and it will gently tuck your pelvis without my needing to kind of over squeeze my bum. Your glutes will work, in fact, just by pressing the hips up. And then you can roll it all the way back down. All right, we're gonna do a little ab work here. If you would like to add the ball for your toe taps, you can lift your hips and put the ball under your bum. You don't want it so high that you're in an arch, so it's definitely gonna be more over or underneath your glutes versus your back. If you don't have the ball, no worries, we're just going into toe tap. So we're gonna come into our imprint position. I'm using my low core and my obliques to draw my ribs and my hips together. So I'm slightly tucked to your pubic bone, rotating towards my chest. Now maybe I start with just hands on my thumbs on my ribs and pinkies on my hips. And I'm just kind of giving myself a sense of, okay, as I lift one leg up with an exhale, so I'm gonna let my breath sort of initiate that movement. Has anything changed in my spine or my pelvis? And we're just gonna alternate marching here. Love that exhale for compression. And the goal is, and the ball is gonna make this a little more exciting, right? It's gonna bring out a lot more instability from side to side, which is one of the reasons it's such a cool prop to use. You could do foam roller stability cushion too. I wanna watch out for splaying. So if my ribs pop, I know I've lost my abs, but I also know I'm probably arching in my back. So we just wanna be really conscientious as we march. If this feels groovy, next time one leg is up, you're gonna exhale to float the second leg. So we just made this harder, right? We turned up the heat a little bit. And then I'm gonna go for a tap. Now, maybe I don't touch quite, maybe I can touch. Just your thigh moving away from your torso is challenging. So whether we actually make contact with the ground, this is a little more extreme toe tap since our hips are higher. Maybe we go no arms. So arms to the ceiling or even arms hovering overhead. Way more challenge now in my upper ribs and my low abs. Still an exhale, compressing the core in, drawing the ribs kind of softly down the front of the body. And we'll just take one more each way. So whatever variation you are taking, we'll even ourselves out here. And then you can just pull your legs into your chest, give yourself a nice little hug here. Maybe crunch the toes, work through the ankles a little bit. So we'll lower the legs gently. If you've got the ball under the bum, you can lift your hips to take the ball out. And then we'll pop that ball in between our inner thighs here. So more abs, round 2. Let's get ab day. So I'm still gonna work in my imprint position. So if I've got that kind of space below my back, I'm gonna think about using my abdominals to draw my ribs and hips together. I'm lengthening my back against the mat. Hands are gonna come behind the head here. So all we're gonna do is a really simple ab crunch. So I'm gonna curl up on my exhale, just gazing just above the knees in that ball. And then can you keep your abs on as you lower back down? And you might notice that if you have a block or a ball in between your thighs, you keep a very gentle squeeze the whole time. And our bodies tend to do a pretty good job at working on concentric motion. So when we come up and crunch, the body goes, awesome, I got all the muscles working, they're all coordinated. And then sometimes we use momentum or kind of collapse out of it when gravity is working against us. So to build extra strength, make your lower 2 counts versus your 1 count lift. Because we actually get stronger holding for isometric and then eccentric, which is our lengthening out of a position. Okay, if you want to make it a little more exciting, lift your heels, drag your toes to your bum with your imprint, float your legs to tabletop. And then same thing, exhale. Now as you lower, you're going to find, ooh, it's a little more exciting, right, in the low core. Because now I'm having to support the legs and the upper body. So if you feel like neck or the back, anything in the form changes, you can always lower those legs back down. Keep an eye on, we're gonna take 4 more here. Keep an eye on as you curl up, is it still coming from your waist? So I should feel like my mid back gets a little heavier as I exhale and then I lengthen back down versus sometimes neck or chin wanna get a little involved. Try one more like this. Nice, then you can lower back down. You're gonna keep the legs up, reach your arms out to a T. We're gonna do some little ab twists. Now, if you need a little more support, you'll bring the toes down, your hip will still lift. So as I lift my left hip, my legs fall to the right, but my left shoulder stays grounded. Now use your breath, exhale and squeeze that ball to draw the ball and the legs back to center. And then we'll switch sides. So we are still passing through imprint in center. So I like to imagine almost like if I had a button and I was sewing it through my belly button and spine to the mat, the first piece that's gonna touch back down is actually that part of my low back opposite my low core versus getting that little bit of an arch happening. Now you can decrease your range from side to side so that you feel like your back is in a safe place. You wanna make this more exciting? The next time you're in center, come up into an ab prep. So now I'm just supporting myself in a crunch. Now you might find you can't go quite as far from side to side, but it's kind of a fun play. Usually I've got one oblique that makes sense and one oblique where it feels like we're gonna barn door and just kind of splay over to the side. So challenge yourself to see if you can allow your waist to rotate without losing the same shoulder blade. So as I go to the right, I'm still trying to stay heavy kind of in my left rib and vice versa. Hopefully you're still breathing. Try one more each way. This one's kind of silly, isn't it? And then you can lower all the way back down. Let your legs fall gently to the right. If you want to take out your block or your ball, we'll take a gentle twist here. So sweeping that arm open, let your shoulder blade slide towards your spine. Maybe you take a little rib rotation and you can kind of manually find shoulder blades flat against the mat. I'm using my opposite arm to keep my leg down if it feels like that hip flexor kind of wants to jump in. And just take about 2 or 3 rounds of breath here. Breathing into that twist. If you want to increase this, you can always lengthen the bottom leg away for a little bit more stretch through that low back and hip. And then we'll sweep that top arm all the way up and over. So you're going to draw kind of a arch over your head and then take your legs over to the other side. So we'll have them in our tabletop position first. And I'm going to play with this, letting my shoulder blades slide. Maybe I do a little kind of working into that twist. So my shoulder blades are as flat as they can be, ribs to the ceiling. I've got this arm to press that leg down if I need, and if I want to increase that stretch. But I've also got that variation. So you have a couple options here. And just take a couple breaths and kind of notice where you feel the stretch. Try to identify places in the body that feel kind of tight and restricted. And then, mental imagery, just send your breath there. Because our fascia can be really tight and stiff if we're not used to breathing into it. And then we'll sweep our arm all the way up and over, and you're just gonna roll onto that side. So whatever side you finished on, I'm on my left side. So I'll do my left side glutes here. Whichever side that you can see from is also good, because we'll do both sides. So whatever's most comfortable for your head. If you've got your ball or block, you could always use it under the ear. My bottom leg can be bent or long, kind of whatever's most supportive. My top leg is gonna come to the front corner of my mat. So I'm going all the way to the front here. Now I'm gonna do a little check of my stack. So my ribs and my hips are all shooting forward. So I just wanna make sure my core is a little engaged to begin. Now turn your whole leg in. So not just my foot, but really from like the source at my thigh. Yeah, nice. Okay, now you're gonna find where a back pocket of your pants would be, or like your swimsuit line, a leotard line. You're gonna find that. So instead of the front of my hip, this is what's lifting. I'm gonna keep my leg super turned in, and I'm just gonna float that leg up. Whee, and then I'm gonna lower back down. And it should feel kind of exciting, like you can find and target that glute med. I would say we'll go for like less reps here, but going a little slower, kind of holding at the top. Initiation is key. Our hip flexors tend to be a little dominant, and our body's really smart. So it figures out how to make something easier. So it's gonna recruit the stronger muscle. So every time you're about to lift, check to make sure, okay, is this gripping first, or can I find that outer hip? Kind of right where that thigh falls into the hip socket. Core will definitely support this. So my core and my glutes support my pelvis in neutral. So if you're feeling like, ooh, back is straining or hip flexor is hard to get out of, gonna return that leg in, check in with your core, relaxing the neck. Love and exhale. Do we feel some bum here? Yeah. Nice, we got one bum. Two bums, I feel mine. Try one more like this. Nice, okay. Now we're gonna bring the legs long underneath us here, and we're gonna do a little hover. So one long line, bottom leg's active as well. You can point or flex your feet, but have your foot pretty active. I'll show with both. So we're gonna float the top leg up and just take a couple here, kind of finding, okay, can I stay stable in my core? Am I relatively even? I'm not pulling this leg forward. Once you've kind of mapped that out, you're gonna float the top leg up, float the second leg to meet it, inner thigh squeeze, and then lower back down. You can always use fingertips on the mat in front if you notice that the trunk and the hips kind of want to spiral away from each other. Kind of our eventual goal would be no hands, so maybe hand on the hip, hand to the ceiling, or maybe hand overhead, which is going to be a little harder. It's a good test, even just to try it, if you notice you like to crunch in the side body. Yeah, really nice, you guys. So much easier to bring our feet together in this one, so it's a lot harder to get those inner thighs to connect. We'll just do one more here. Yeah, lovely. Okay, bend your legs. One more little glute thing here. So kind of a casual clamshell, knees a little below your hips. We're gonna float the leg up to hip height here, and we're just gonna do external and internal rotation. So I'm gonna press my thigh back, bring my foot forward, right, same outer hip component, and then I'm allowing my knee to drop and my foot to lift. And just keeping it about hip height. Obviously, the knee goes a little higher. Just Just noticing if you're totally losing it on that turn in, see if you can keep it about hip height. So you should feel some work through the back of the glute, kind of that pressing clamshell, and it might almost feel just more like allowing movement in the turn in department. If your hip is doing a big rock, maybe keep a hand on that hip bone just to give yourself a sense of thigh moving in hip socket versus hip moving back and forth. And we'll just try one more each way. And then you can lengthen that leg out, give your bum a little thank you. Do we feel some glute there? Nice, okay. I felt some glute. I feel like they got worked. All right, we're gonna roll onto our front here. We'll do just a little extension. So we're gonna do a little extension with some tricep pulses. So we'll bring our arms down by our sides. We're gonna press down through the tops of the feet. So I've got my glutes on, hammies on, core is engaged. I'm rolling my shoulders up and back, so my scapula engaged. And then I'm just gonna come to a little hover. So not super big here. I'm gonna take 3 little reaches of my pinkies to the ceiling, 2, and last 1. And then I can either stay or I can lower back down and then reset in between. So we'll take a couple rounds of these. You can hold the entire time if that feels okay, or you can reset. So we're floating up. We're gonna reach the pinkies back for 1, 2, and 3. And then again, you can lower back down or you can stay up. So we're just checking, not super high extension. I'm still looking at my mat for 3, 2, trying to let my shoulder blades gently squeeze together. And we'll do this 2 more times here. So rolling back, see if you can keep your elbows straight. I want to think instead of that kind of shoulder head dipping forward, it's my shoulder blade that wraps to allow me to reach that arm back. And we'll just do 1 more like this. Pulsing for 3, and 2, and 1. And then you can bring your hands back by your shoulders. We're gonna press back here, take a child's pose. You could do knees wide or knees together, whatever feels better. Knees together can be a little nicer in the low back. Knees wider can be a little nicer in the hips. And then just gently walking yourself back up here. We're gonna slide onto the other side. So adjust your facing accordingly. See what we can do side 2 of the glutes. Ball or block for under the head is an awesome option if you have it. So for our first one, bottom leg can be bent or long, whatever's kind of the most supportive. Take a little check. So shoulders, ribs, hips, square to the front of your mat. And then you're gonna take your top leg and you're gonna set it towards the very front edge of the mat. Nice, before you lift it, turn the whole leg in and notice the foot can kind of pretend to turn in, but really find it from that thigh. You're gonna find that outer hip back pocket, kind of the line of a swimsuit or a leotard. You're just gonna float up and lower back down. Yeah, core is definitely supporting. So if you notice that kind of classic, when I lift my leg, my ribs sink. So we'll find a little core engagement. I like this idea of reaching your leg away from your own body as you lift it. So you're creating a little bit more space through the top, not only of the torso, but the hip joint itself. This side might feel harder because we already worked the first side. So you might find your supporting glute is a little fatigued. And you're just cueing into that, a very initial kind of float up. Is hip flexor trying to do too much? Okay, then maybe I need to just adjust my leg a little bit more in front, turn it in a little bit more, find core, cue that glute med as you float up. And we'll take a couple more here. You feeling some glute med, hopefully? Let's try 1 more like this. All right, so now we'll lengthen both legs long, super active. So you could have the feet flexed or pointed. We just want to get really active through the thighs. Here's our lift, and we're gonna meet with the bottom legs. I'm gonna float up, just kind of check in on this side, maybe 1 or 2 Where's your stack, right? Ribs and hips sometimes are a little off kilter. And then once you feel like you found that trajectory, float that leg up. Your second leg meets. So inner thighs versus feet. And then you're gonna lower back down. You could always have the fingers on the ground. You know, maybe you start there just to give yourself a sense of, okay, where am I? And then eventually we wanna get to where we could float that top arm up. If the hip ever doesn't like this one, which I should have mentioned on the first side, I'm sorry for not mentioning, you can always pad your hip by folding your mat. So if you've got a kneeling pad, something like that too. And if you want, you can reach your arm overhead for a little more excitement, right? Always harder lever, further from the core, from the center. And if you like to crunch on this side, it makes it a little harder to overwork that lat. Let's try one more here. Yeah, very full value, that one. So we'll bend the legs here, casual clamshell. Knees will be a little bit lower than your hips. Give yourself a little check, right? Core's on, pushing the tailbone away. We're gonna float the leg up to hip height. Here's our internal, external rotation. So I'm gonna rotate using that outer hip. I'm really pressing the knee back. And then I'm gonna turn in. I'm just allowing for the most rotation I can possibly find. And just easy breath and sort of noticing, does rib cage want to just hold tension, or neck or jaw? How can I stabilize in the core and really my mind's eye is on that hip joint? And I'm allowing for movement in both directions. No need to go fast if you find one direction is a little bit harder than the other. You can always go a little bit slower. We'll do one more set here. And then take a little rest. Nice. Hopefully we felt some bum a little bit. We'll flip onto our front here. We'll do a little more extension. So for this one, we're going to do a single leg extension. So we worked the glutes, right? Glute med, and work glute max a little bit more. So you can rest either your forehead on your hands, or you're welcome to turn and rest on your cheek. Reach your legs away just to kind of open up the front of the hips a little bit. So you're creating some space. So we'll essentially sequence this as my core is engaged. I'm going to press down through the top of my foot so that I've got that glute and hamstring already active. And then I'm using this like you imagine there's like a little dowel in my hip. This is where my movement comes from, is that hip joint. And so we'll play with alternating sides here and go nice and slow, kind of isolate. Can I lift? Just swiveling on that imaginary dowel from my glute. Should feel like the front of the hip can open. Yeah, and a couple things that sometimes can happen is we can get hamstring sometimes wants to do the load. If your knee bends right away, that can be a sign that hammy's trying to do a little too much. So then maybe give yourself a little wiggle and see if you can cue more into bum. There is a little bit of movement in the low back, right? Your pelvis does tip just a little bit. So the core is going to support us here. Should feel like as if someone's brushing the front of your hip open. Nice. So we're going to take this into swimming, which I almost never do in this class because it's just an exercise. It's really silly. So we're going to try it today. It is really good. It's valuable. If upper body does not like this position, you can keep your arms here and just scissor your legs. So in our swimming arms, traditionally, we're here and we're sustaining a motion, right? We're going to go contralateral like your bird dog. No need to lift the arms fully. Another great hack is keeping your prep variation where your opposite limbs are on the ground, and then you can work your way up. But absolute permission to start here and just hover. I'm going to show the full version. So the arms overhead, we're going to keep our gaze down. My core is engaged. On my inhale, I'm going to float everything else, everything up off the ground. And then I'm going to pump opposite right and left, and maybe go a little slow to start. But I'm inhaling for 2 and exhaling for 2. And as you increase your speed, maybe I inhale for 4 and exhale for 4. And I'm trying to move from my shoulder joints and from my glutes And we'll go for 2 more sets of whichever version you are trying. And exhaling for 4. And then you can bring your arms back by your hips here, or back by your ribs. These are not your hips. And then you can press back and take a child's pose. Yeah, swimming is a tricky exercise. And oftentimes it's the hip joint component that gets us into our back a bit. So practicing those nice and slow can be a really great option. We're gonna walk ourselves back up here and we'll do a little bit more hands and knees. So for this variation, we're gonna play kind of a more advanced version of our bird dog. So I'm sticking with the same side. Let's go for 6 reps. I'm gonna sweep my opposite arm and leg. Now you could just simply touch, or you can go for your full float. That's what I'll be showing here. And you're gonna try to bring, so I'm adding a little element of my cat-cow, my working elbow and knee together underneath me. So I do have to create some space by rounding and pushing away, but I'm just gonna sweep out to a neutral position. So we're not gonna go into an arch. And we'll try this about 5 more times. My supporting hip is working like crazy to keep from falling out to the side. So I'm really pushing that supporting hip in. And then I'm pushing out of my supporting arm to create some space. Tons of balance here. You've got 1 more. And then we'll take a little rest in child's pose just to get off the wrists for a moment. Feel free to flip your wrists so your palms are forward. I'll yak at you for a second while you rest. So before we go to the other side, 2 things to just kind of keep track of. That supporting hip. If it falls out to the side, I lose height, right? So now there's a little less space underneath me. So if I can bring this hip in, I've just gotten a lot more space. So it'll help if you've got less like deep hip flexion. And then as we come into these, we'll do 6 on our second side. Keep the core on when you extend. So as I sweep away, core is really lifted. As I exhale, right, this one's a little more obvious. It's on that extension. Can I keep the core engaged when I'm extending long? Right, and you could definitely do this one. We're almost there. With your limbs tapping to the edges versus floating. So this gives you a little more core contact. 1 more. Then take a little rest. Thanks, you guys. Let's come on to our bums again. We'll do some more ab work. So if you don't have a ball, then you get to hold this without the ball. So you get just as much work in a different way. If you have the ball, which we do in class today, we're gonna find a spot where we're gonna roll back ever so slightly, but we get to find a little support on the ball. The key to this one is it should feel like we're not in an arch, but that we're still rounded. It also should feel like a little work just to be here. So when we're resting on the ball, I want you to think about flexing your upper abs so that you're kind of a little on. We should feel like a little trembly kind of in this moment. You're gonna plug your shoulder blades back, keep curling up and over. Just one arm reaches out to the side and then bring that arm back in. Opposite arm reaches out to the side. And so with the ball, if you're doing ball version, what's nice about this is you'll notice pretty quickly if you start arching back over the ball. We start to extend. Curl up a little higher every time you bring your arm back to center from that supporting floating rib cage. Okay, pause here. One arm reaches up, one arm reaches down. Inhaling and exhaling. Notice if there's a shift in the ribs from right to left. Right, and we can do this without the ball, so if the ball feels like it's more distracting than helpful, that's totally fine to ditch it. Still holding our half roll back. You get 1 more each way. Nice, then you can roll all the way forward. Yeah, does that make the stability in the ball? It kind of definitely shows you when you're arching back pretty quickly. Come into your butterfly for a moment. Whatever distance feels best. We're just gonna do a little cat-cow here. So I'm holding onto my ankles. I'm gonna tuck my chin and let my shoulder blades open. away from my spine. And then I'm gonna roll forward on my sits bones and lift my chest forward. Maybe my elbows bend, maybe they don't. And we'll do that 2 more times. So pelvis gets to roll too. So I get to kind of use my own body, essentially, my bones, to get a nice stretch through my shoulder blades and then pulling on my ankles gently to find extension. Let's do 1 more here. Okay, we'll take it into a little more core work. So you can bring your legs back up. We'll take just a little deep hip flexor business. So no props needed for this one. We're gonna come behind the thighs. We're rolling back to that same half roll back position. Without letting the spine or the pelvis change, you're gonna float one leg to tabletop and then lower that leg down. And then try the other side. Yeah, nice. Exactly. So versus, you guys all look really good, versus knee extension, it's hip extension. So I can really press with my hamstring into my thigh to kind of help facilitate that joint movement. And if that's feeling good, you can go no hands, which obviously turns up the hip flexor a lot more. And this is a tough one. We tend to have really tight hip flexors, but not always really strong hip flexors, right? Tight and long don't necessarily signify weak or strong. And then we're gonna try holding on this next one. If you wanna revisit the hand, we're gonna do a little teaser balance here. If your spine goes, woo, flat pop, then try to push a little bit more. So you're getting more hamstring to bicep. It should feel like it's always a little bit moving, right? Like it's not just like I could stay here and freeze. We wanna have that little bit of kind of stabilizing. Then you know you're in the right place. Let's hold for 3 and 2, still breathing for 1, and then you can rock forward. Nice work, take a little butterfly if that feels good. We'll do a couple full roll-ups here. Bent legs are always a great option if you're learning roll-up, but also sometimes for some of us, back just prefers bent legs. So always an option if you've got your ball or your block. I can use my arms. It's just like your half roll back, except that my head and shoulders come all the way back down. Here's where I can utilize momentum, my arm timing, and breath. So I can seat my arms up. When I see them pass my eyes, I exhale and I can grab to roll back up. Ball squeeze will start to get coordinated in with that too, right? So as I roll back, I've got my ball squeezed, a lot to keep track of. And then I can inhale as I exhale, squeeze the ball as well. So it's a pump and a ball squeeze with that grab. Straight legs, totally fine too, right? A little bit harder to stay out of the hip flexors. So you really want to reach your heels away. As you feel like you're getting a little bit more comfortable with your roll up, try to take away all of the momentum. So just 0 momentum on the way up. And let's just do 2 more like this. So we won't do a ton of these because we're going to do some more ab torture on the mat. Yeah, nice, exactly. And this looks really nice. You're taking your shoulders with you. So we'll meet up on that last one. Just make sure sometimes arms stay in space. Take your arms with you. My arms are coming with me on the way down. And then we'll lie all the way down on the mat. You can take a big stretch here, big starfish stretch. Crunching the toes, fingers, rolling ankles, little hip wiggle. We'll ditch the ball or block for a moment. And we'll do a little shoulder bridge action. So you can bring your feet in line with your sits bones for this first one. And we're just gonna press up. So we're just pressing up, we're finding that position. Again, we wanna watch out for the low back arching. So we wanna find a scoop of the abs. So definitely more kind of an ab-oriented shoulder bridge in our Pilates classes. Your bum will turn on right away. You can always lower the hips if you feel like that low back is at risk. So all I'm gonna do, maybe reaching the arms to the ceiling, I'm gonna do a tiny little hip break and I'm gonna pulse to push through my heels to lift back up. So it's a little hip break, lowering the hips, and then pulsing to push back up. So we're just noticing that little break, keeping the abs on the whole time, keeping the knees stable over the toes. We've got 2 more here. On your next one, you're gonna hold at the top, just check in with everything feeling pretty even and neutral. You're gonna open one arm out to the side, just a little hover, Bring that arm back up and then switch sides. So as you open one arm out to the side and bring it back in, this is kind of a distraction. Can we stay stable in the hips? If we notice they're shifting or starting to lower, can we refresh the push up as much as the core engagement in? And let's just take one more to each side. Right, if you need to lower your arms back down, you can. Keep your hips up. We got 10 more pulses. So you're gonna drop and then push to pulse. Again, little hip break. As you get a little tired, does the rib cage start to get a little overly engaged? So am I maybe starting to pulse, not just from my hip joint, you're halfway here, but maybe the rib cage. So let's keep an eye on ribs. Nice, let's go for 3. Keep those knees stable. Last 2. Last 1. And then you can roll all the way down. Nice. If you have your ball or block, we're going to come into our imprint position here. So finding that nice lengthened back. My obliques are drawing my ribs and hips together. I'm going to float one leg at a time into tabletop. I'm going to press my ball or my block against my thighs. And so all I want you to do is find, using your core, a squeeze on the ball. So your hands and your thighs are kind of the vessel from your core. So as they squeeze, my core is really doing the work. And if this is feeling pretty good, you can try a toe tap. So the ball will just gently shift from one side to the other. And I'm trying not to let anything change. So we're looking for, of course, ribs popping, or back popping. We know those are pretty standard ones, but any shifting from side to side. If you feel pretty good here, you can add your opposite arm. So when I tap my left toe, my arm reaches overhead, my right arm, and then I'll switch. So now I'm adding a little bit more load, but also more opportunity to kind of lose that core stability. So you can just do the legs, or you can add the arms in here too. And we'll just do 4 more. Exhaling to extend. Most important piece is keeping an eye on the spine and the pelvic position. Last 2. Last 1. And then you can gently hug your legs into your chest. Take a nice little rock from side to side. Hopefully we felt a little ab work there. So we've done a lot of hip kind of flexion. So we'll do a little scissor to get a little extension. So for scissor, you absolutely can keep your head down if the neck is kind of over it. We'll do the stretching version of scissor. So I can either grab hamstring or calf, or ankle, just try not to grab the knee itself as we switch. I want to emphasize using your bottom leg. So we really want to engage through maybe the heel, but through the legs, through the feet. So I'll have you come into your imprint position. We'll float the legs to tabletop. If you're going to bring your head and your shoulders up, we'll reach the arms overhead. Take a breath in. And then as you exhale, you're going to lift up, grab the right leg. So back of the thigh, calf or ankle, and then inhale and exhale to switch. And so we're going for a stretch version. So we don't have to go super fast for this one, but the more we can press with that opposite glute and heel to open up the hip flexor, the more stretch we'll get. The perk of the stretch version, if you are doing abs, is you can really pull yourself up. So I can use my arms against my leg to come up a little higher, just making sure that neck feels comfortable. Nice, and hips are still stable. We've got 4 more here. Exhaling for 3 and 2. Nice, you guys, last 1. And then you can lower your head and shoulders. Bring your hands to your knees here and just make a couple circles, circling out and away. So kind of stirring the thighs in the hip socket here. If you're getting into any clunking, not necessarily the worst thing in the world. It just means we're a little out of socket. So we'll reverse it here, trying to stay with that thigh in the center of the socket. See if you can work a couple circles without going into that clunk. We'll do 1 more like this. Nice, and then you can come back down. We're gonna do a little shoulder bridge round 2. So lots of bum today. This is gonna be a single leg. So we'll start with a march. So I'm gonna, again, lift into my shoulder bridge position. I'm just checking if I'm arched out, find my abs. Arms can start down or maybe elbows bent, triceps pressing to the ground. I'm gonna push through my supporting leg and float my opposite leg to tabletop. And then I'm gonna hold for a breath, lower back down, and try the other side. So a little bit slower here. If this is too much, you can always keep the opposite leg down and just lift the heel, right? So I can just do a little heel lift if I need a little bit more support today. Arms to the ceiling, arms on the body. Hips are always a great option just because they give us some good feedback of if you are staying level. We're gonna take one more each way. And then lower all the way down. Take a little windshield wiper here. We're gonna go into a single leg lift and lower. We'll go for 6 on each side. So we'll reset feet in our hip distance. Let's lift our right leg first. So our right leg's gonna be in tabletop. Remember the hips are connected, so this leg is a little bit of a ballast. You've got your options, arms down, elbows, or arms to the ceiling. I'm already primed and ready. This glute's gonna press. When you're ready, we're gonna exhale to press the hips up, and then just lower back down, tap, and then press again. So it's not a full offloading of the weight. We've got 4, watching for popping the ribs or arching the back. My core is on for 3. Last 2, hips are still square, maybe hands on the hips. Last 1. Nice, and then you can switch your legs out. So we'll bring the right leg down, left leg up. Square yourself up if you notice you got a little bit wonky there. Primed and ready with the glute and the abs. You're gonna lift for 6, just a little touch, and then a lift again. Keeping the core engaged. Nice, you've got 3 more. Imagine that imaginary dowel through your hips here. For 2. Got 1 more. And then lowering back down, nice work. Lengthen your left leg. We'll take our right leg first. You can thread your hands behind your right thigh. And then just draw your leg so that you're kind of pinning with your own arms, your thigh towards your chest. You're just gonna kick that leg towards the ceiling. So nice little hamstring stretch here. Knee pump, you can kick and release. The idea is it doesn't really matter if this leg is straight or not. I'm just using my arms to keep my thigh still, so I'm getting a really active stretch here. You can point your foot or flex. It doesn't actually make a difference for the hamstring length. If the flexed foot feels a little spicier, it's because it's more of a nerve stretch. So feel free to mix up the foot position. We'll do 1 more like this. And then gently you can exchange your legs. If low back needs more support, you can always bend your supporting leg too. I'm showing with this leg long, you'll draw that leg into your chest. And then same thing, just kind of kicking to the ceiling and releasing. By no means do you have to hold it the whole time, so it feels really intense. Maybe you take them just a little faster. Breathing is kind of number 1. Can you breathe? Kind of number 1. It's very number 1. We'll take 1 more like this. Nice. And we'll do a little oblique work here. So you can bring your ball, some fun ab burnout. We'll do ball under our left foot to start. And so all this leg is going to do is a little pumping action in and out. And you can kind of find, even just with a couple practice ones, you can really relax the hip flexor, which is nice. So it should feel like this hip flexor can chill out pretty well. I'm going to come into my imprint again. So we'll come back to that flat back position. And then I'm going to draw my right leg to tabletop. And then all we're going to do with our head down to start is we're going to exhale into our bicycle, kicking the right leg long, bending the ball leg in, and then returning that leg to tabletop. So just a little bicycle. Can I stay stable? So as I'm doing this here, I'm checking to stay even and lengthened on both sides. Now, if this is feeling good, you can clasp your hands behind your head We're gonna exhale to curl up, and we're just gonna stay on our ab prep. So I'm just turning up the heat just a little bit more. Still a ton of work if the head is down. And then if you want just a little bit more for the last 6, when your right leg draws in, you're gonna rotate towards that right leg. So a little oblique crunch towards your non-ball side. I wanna make sure I'm staying off my right elbow. You're halfway, you've got 3 more. So it's an up and over more than a lean. Last one. And then you can lower your head and shoulders here. Bend the leg in, we'll switch sides. So we'll pop that right foot on the ball. Start with just a couple kind of pump, square yourself up here. Get that ball in a place that feels, and the ball's not perfect. Obviously, if you don't have a ball at home, you're doing just your regular bicycle. You can play with dragging the foot. It's not a perfect science, but worth a try. Once that feels good, come into your imprint, float that left leg to tabletop. So we'll take a couple of bicycles with the head down. Now you can choose your height. So higher, right, is gonna be a little easier because it's closer in, but it is a little more hip flexor. Lower is gonna be a little more glute. And then if you want to, clasp your hands behind your head, curl up and take a couple in your ab prep. What I like about the ab prep is you can kind of see if you're staying even, which is nice. You can also feel it out with hands on the hip bones. And then for the last 6, we're gonna add that oblique twist. So I'm gonna rotate towards my left thigh, the leg that isn't on the ball. Exhaling, I'm thinking more of a twist versus a side bend. Last 3. Exhaling for 2. Last 1. And then you can lower your head and shoulders. Nice, walk your feet out a little wider. Take a really nice wide windshield wiper arms out into a T. Hopefully we're feeling a little bit more core here. So for our next little core ab burnout, again, you can take your ball or block. You're gonna place it in between your thighs. Coming back into my imprint position, you're gonna lift the heels and drag the legs to tabletop. So we're gonna play with a little low core lifts. This is our airplane prep for Cadillac. So I'm squeezing the ball. I can use my arms to press down to try to lift my bum off the mat and slowly roll back down. Now I'm just doing bums. This isn't your full rollover, but you can think of it as like the initial movement of your rollover, your short spine. Squeezing the ball will help. If this feels okay, maybe just elbows, right? I'm taking away surface area and support. Maybe I make it harder still and reach my arms to the ceiling. So obviously, as we progress, you might notice that, of course, it's a little easier when I've got more arm down on the mat. Now, if you want to make this harder still, you can add a double toe tap on the other end. So I curl up with an exhale, control back down, take a breath in, exhale to tap. Maybe we don't actually touch the ground. Again, just the act of the thigh moving away from the core is a ton of work. You've got 3 more here. Nice, for 2. Trying to stay even on both sides. Last one. And then you can take a rest. Nice. Take that ball out. You're gonna cross your right ankle over your left thigh. So a little figure 4 here. You can reach your arms to a T and then play with twisting from side to side. Now, if this is not enough, you feel like you're not getting a big stretch, you can lift the legs to tabletop. You're actively pressing that top thigh down, or rather top thigh in, and wrapping your top thigh out, and then you can take your twists. And we know when we have to work through mobility, that's when we, like through a stretch, we get more mobility versus our passive stretching. We're gonna get a lot more kind of gains out of this one. If one side feels really good and you wanna stay for a moment in that twist, you can take a breath or 2, keep the core engaged even in your stretch here. And then we can play with our piriformis stretch. So you'll cross your right leg all the way over your left, like you're sitting in a chair. And then either grabbing thighs or down the shins, you can pull your legs into your chest. So I'm kind of trying to get external rotation as I press my bum down. I'll show this one. Yeah, this looks good. You guys, like seated, it would be an external rotation. So that's kind of the position we're trying to mimic. This one's usually just a lot more gentle on knees, but if you ever wanted to take it seated, you totally could. And then release your hands. You can keep your legs crossed and just let your legs fall to the left. So I've got kind of a deeper twist. If this feels like too much, just lengthen that bottom leg away. Right arm's gonna reach in opposition here. If it feels okay to turn the head, gazing towards the hand. See again, if you can rotate the ribs enough that you can get your shoulder blades flat on the ground. And then if there was an inner tube around your waist, just breathing into that imaginary inner tube. So finding more breath in your trunk will actually open up a little more space for your twist. And when you're ready to come out of it, just gently let your knees rotate up to the ceiling and take something that's kind of symmetrical for a moment. So maybe it's just lengthening your legs long and taking kind of a little flop from side to side, or, you know, finding, again, a windshield wiper, legs to the ceiling, something to sort of, okay, check in. How is each side feeling? We'll start with the left leg crossing. Figure four with your twists. You can reach your arms out to the side here in a nice big T. And if this isn't enough resistance, right, core still engaged, we're just gonna float the legs to tabletop. So we're actively having to work through that hip stretch. Right, always a good moment to kind of check in with, like, what are my feet doing? How's the ankle range of motion? My toes moving today? If it feels good to stay in one of the sides of the stretch a little longer, you can take a couple of breaths in that. And then we'll play with our piriformis stretch. So crossing that top leg all the way over, so our thighs are stacked, either grabbing below or finding shins. This one's pretty active. So I'm finding kind of compression as I draw my legs into my chest. My pelvis is gonna pull off the ground. I'm gonna see if I can lengthen my tailbone back onto the ground. So it's a pretty active stretch. And then when you're ready, just let those legs fall to your right. My left leg's on top, they're gonna go to the right. And then I can sweep my left arm in opposition again, maybe kind of working your rib cage so that your shoulder blades are flush. Maybe turning the head if that feels okay on the neck, and looking at the hand. And this challenging yourself to kind of find areas of tension and use your breath to unlock them a little bit. So body scan, what's maybe braced and gripped and holding that doesn't need to. Kind of trusting that the ground has your support for you here. And then just gently, again, letting the knees come back up to center. And then just thinking about how you would like to exit. So maybe a really nice full roll up to finish, gently rolling to the side and supporting yourself up, maybe a rock and roll. So bringing the legs into the chest, kind of figuring out how you want to leave energetically. Do you have a little bit of intention since you just did a nice stretch? And I'll leave you guys there. Thanks for coming. Yeah, thanks so much. Nice to see you again. Thank you. Let me know if you have any questions, any requests. We'd love to hear it.